You're not stuck, you're conditioned. That feeling of being trapped, of spinning your wheels while life rushes past you, it's not because you lack potential, because you're broken, or because life dealt you the wrong hand. It's because somewhere along the way, your mind got programmed to play small, to survive, to avoid pain. And now, without even realizing it, you're running that same old program on repeat. Let's be honest. Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to sabotage my dreams today. But that's exactly what's happening, because your nervous system, your identity, your patterns, they're not wired for freedom. They're wired for familiarity. And if you've been living in fear, doubt, or disappointment for long enough, guess what becomes familiar? Suffering, struggle, settling. You weren't born this way. You didn't pop out of the womb playing small. Look at a baby. They don't second guess themselves. They don't sit there wondering, am I good enough to walk today? No. They fall down 1,000 times and keep going. They scream when they want something. They demand attention. They know instinctively that they are worthy of love, worthy of support, worthy of thriving. So what changed? What changed is the story you began to absorb from the world around you. Maybe someone told you that you're not smart enough, not pretty enough, not strong enough. Maybe they didn't even have to say it with words. Maybe it was a look, a shrug, a lack of encouragement. And your brain, your brilliant, protective brain, made a decision, I'd better not try, better play it safe, I'd better fit in. That moment right there. That's the seed of conditioning. And once that seed is planted, your subconscious mind takes over. It starts looking for evidence that supports the story. You mess up once. See, I'm not good enough. You don't get picked. See, I'm not wanted. You fail at something new. See, I shouldn't even have tried. Over time, these micro experiences stack into beliefs. And beliefs create behavior. Behavior creates results, and results reinforce beliefs. That's the loop. That's the trap. But the trap isn't real. It's just a program. It's like a record playing the same sad song over and over. And every time you hear it, you feel the same emotion. You think the same thoughts. You take the same actions or inactions. You feel stuck, not because you are, but because you've mistaken that soundtrack in your head for reality. What you've really been doing is running someone else's rules. Maybe your parents' limitations, maybe society's fears, maybe your own past mistakes. But none of that is you. You've just become a character in a script that was never written for your highest self. And the longer you play that character, the more you forget you have the power to change the script entirely. Here's the kicker. Your nervous system doesn't care if your conditioning is keeping you miserable. It only cares that it feels safe. And safety isn't about joy. It's about certainty. That's why people stay in toxic relationships. That's why they stay in jobs they hate. That's why they procrastinate on dreams that could change their lives. Because to the conditioned mind, familiar pain is more comfortable than unfamiliar possibility. But the truth that cuts through all of this is that every behavior, every habit, every belief that's keeping you stuck was learned. And if it was learned, it can be unlearned. You weren't born with self-doubt. You weren't born with fear of failure. You weren't born thinking small. Those were installed. And now it's time to uninstall them. Imagine your mind as a computer. Every belief you have is a line of code. Some of it's clean, some of it's corrupt, and the corrupt code is crashing your system every time you try to grow. You don't need to burn the whole machine down, you need to rewrite the code. But to do that, you've got to become aware. You've got to step back from your own thoughts and see them not as facts, but as patterns. You've got to ask yourself, where did this come from? Who told me this was true? Is this belief serving me or sabotaging me? And you've got to be ruthless about cutting the cords to anything that keeps you small. Because every time you act from you strengthen it. And every time you break the pattern, even just once, you weaken its grip. Let me tell you something, the version of you that feels stuck, that's not who you are. That's who you've practiced being. And if you can practice being stuck, you can practice being free. It's a matter of repetition, of rewiring, of training your nervous system to associate power with possibility, not just protection. You don't need more time. You don't need more motivation. You need to see the truth. You are not stuck. You are conditioned, and conditioning can be changed the moment you decide you're done living inside a lie. Clarity is power. Most people aren't suffering from a lack of intelligence or talent or opportunity. They're suffering from a lack of direction. They wake up, go through the motions, check off the boxes, and wonder why they feel so unfulfilled. It's not because they're incapable. It's because they have no vision pulling them forward. When your life lacks clarity, your decisions become reactive, your emotions become scattered, and your actions become inconsistent. You're not failing because you're broken. You're failing because you haven't decided with absolute certainty where you want to go. You can't hit a target you can't see. That's the brutal truth. And yet most people are walking around with vague desires, loose ideas, and half-hearted intentions. I just want to be happy. I want to make more money. I want a better relationship. That's not a vision. That's a wish list. And wishes don't create change. Clarity does. Because when you're clear, you get focused. And when you're focused, you become powerful. Clarity doesn't just come from thinking about what you want. It comes from deciding what you're no longer willing to tolerate. Most people don't move until the pain gets strong enough. But when you finally get sick and tired of living the same story, when you get emotional associated to what staying stuck is costing you, clarity starts to emerge like a laser. Not a fog, not a hope, clarity. That's when the internal switch flips. That's when someday becomes now. Your brain is a goal-seeking machine. It's wired to find answers, to solve problems, to chase what matters. But if you haven't told it clearly what matters, it will chase whatever is urgent, whatever's loud, whatever grabs your attention. That's how people end up years down a path they never consciously chose. They let the world decide for them. They drift into jobs, drift into relationships, drift into debt, drift into mediocrity because they never took the time to define where they actually wanted to go. Clarity gives you leverage. When you're clear on what you want, decisions become easier. Distractions lose their power. The noise of the world doesn't shake you because you're anchored to something bigger. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You stop chasing applause and start chasing alignment. You stop running in circles and start moving in a straight line toward what actually matters to you. There's a reason why elite performers obsess over vision. It's not just for motivation, it's for direction. If you don't know what your ideal life looks like in vivid detail, then you're operating with a blindfold on. And when you're blind, fear takes over, confusion takes over, overwhelm becomes the norm. But when you're clear, when your vision is specific, compelling, and alive in your nervous system, you start showing up differently, you speak differently, you act differently. People feel it, they respond to it. The world starts organizing around your certainty, but clarity doesn't fall from the sky. You don't stumble into it, you create it, you craft it, you carve it out with intention. That means sitting down with yourself and getting brutally honest. What do you actually want? What your parents want, not what your friends expect, not what social media tells you to chase. What you want. What would light your soul on fire? What outcome would make all the discomfort, all the sacrifice, all the discipline worth it? Most people are afraid to get clear because clarity brings responsibility. When you're vague, you've always got an excuse. I don't know what I want becomes a shield you hide behind. But when you get clear, when you say this is the standard, this is the vision, this is who I'm becoming, now you've drawn a line in the sand. Now your choices either align or they don't, and that scares people. But what they don't realize is that clarity is the beginning of freedom. Because when you finally define what success looks like for you, you stop chasing everything else. Clarity fuels momentum. It creates emotional energy. It transforms effort into purpose. That's why the people who seem lucky aren't actually lucky. They're just clear. They know what they're chasing. So when opportunity shows up, they recognize it. They grab it. They don't hesitate because their vision has already been rehearsed in their mind 1,000 times. They're not thinking about whether it fits. They know it fits because it's part of the picture they've already painted. Without clarity, life is chaos. You end up stuck in someone else's script, playing a role you never auditioned for. But when you gain clarity, you take the pen back. You become the author again. You start writing your life, not reacting to it. You shift from passive to powerful. You become intentional with your time, your energy, your relationships. Everything gets filtered through one lens. Does this move me closer to my vision or not? Your standards are too low? That's why you're stuck. That's why you're not getting what you want. Not because you're not capable, not because you don't have potential, not because the universe is against you, but because you've decided, consciously or unconsciously, that it's okay to live below your potential. You've made it acceptable to feel tired every day. You've made it normal to procrastinate. You've made it reasonable to tolerate mediocre relationships, average results, and emotions that drag you down instead of lift you up. You've trained yourself to survive when you were born to lead, create, and thrive. Every breakthrough begins with a decision. A moment when you say, enough. Not, I kind of want things to get better. Not maybe someday, but a non-negotiable decision that this is no longer acceptable. People love to chase motivation. They want the feeling first, but they forget that standards are what create the environment for greatness. When your standards are high enough, you no longer wait for inspiration. You don't need someone to push you. You don't need perfect circumstances. Your standard becomes the force that pulls you forward. If you've been stuck for a while, if you feel like you're not moving, like you're repeating the same patterns, the same setbacks, the same emotional roller coasters, I can almost guarantee that you've settled for a standard that no longer serves you. Maybe your standard is, I'll try, instead of, I'll do whatever it takes. Maybe your standard is, I'll be consistent until it gets hard. Maybe it's, I'll speak up when it's comfortable, or I'll take care of myself when I have time. These sound innocent. They even sound reasonable, but they're killing your progress. Low standards are seductive because they feel safe. They keep you in your comfort zone. They give you the illusion of being in control. Even while your life is slipping through your fingers, it feels easier to set the bar low so you never fail. But what you don't realize is that low standards guarantee failure. It just happens over time. It's the slow erosion of your passion, your belief, your sense of possibility. You don't notice it all at once. It sneaks up on you. One skipped workout and broken promise, one day of settling, and then another, and another, until mediocrity becomes your identity. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your standards. You can say all the affirmations you want. You can make vision boards and write in journals and read every self-help book on the planet. But if your standards don't change, nothing changes. You can't wish your way to a better life. You can't hope your way into discipline. You've got to raise the bar. And not just once, every day. Every decision, every moment you get the urge to slip back into old patterns, you've got to interrupt the cycle and remind yourself who you've decided to become. Raising your standards isn't about perfection. It's not about grinding yourself into the ground or never having a bad day. It's about redefining what's acceptable, what's non-negotiable. It's about drawing a line and saying, from this moment on, I don't do excuses. I don't half commit. I don't play small. Because when your standard shifts, your behavior automatically shifts. You don't need to try to be more disciplined. You just become it because the alternative is no longer an option. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem unstoppable, magnetic, fulfilled. They don't have more hours in the day. They don't have secret shortcuts. What they have are standards that demand greatness, standards that force growth, standards that make it impossible to drift. You see the results and think, I want that. But you haven't seen the non-negotiables they've set behind the scenes. You haven't seen the nights they said no to distraction, the mornings they showed up when no one was watching. The boundaries they created, not because it was easy, because it was required. You will always get your musts, not your shoulds. You should wake up early. You should speak your truth. You should follow your dream. But unless it becomes a must, unless it becomes part of your standard identity, you'll keep finding reasons to delay. Life doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you are, and who you are is determined by what you're willing to demand from yourself, especially when it's uncomfortable. There is a direct correlation between the quality of your life and the standards you refuse to drop below. Not occasionally, consistently. Anyone can raise their standards for a day, a week, even a month, but lasting change comes when you make it part of your identity. When you say, this is just who I am now. I don't negotiate with laziness. I tolerate toxic energy. I don't dabble in my goals. I'm all in, period. No matter what. When you operate from that place, things begin to move. Life responds differently. Doors open. People show up, opportunities align, not because you're lucky, but because you're finally living at the level you were designed for. Emotion drives motion. Every action you take or fail to take is rooted in emotion. People love to believe that logic controls their lives, that they make decisions based purely on facts, on data, on careful analysis. But that's not how the human system works. Your nervous system isn't moved by numbers. It's moved by feelings. It's emotion that gets you out of bed at 5 a.m. to chase a goal. And it's also emotion that keeps you hitting snooze while your dreams quietly die. Until you learn to master your emotional state, you will always be a slave to your environment, to your mood, to the chaos of life pulling you in 1,000 directions. You're not stuck because you don't know what to do. You're stuck because you don't feel like doing it. That's the real problem. Strategy is important, yes, but it's not the issue for most people. The tools are out there. You could Google your way to a 6-figure business. You could follow a YouTube workout and transform your body. You could learn a new skill in 90 days if you really wanted to. But none of that matters if you can't get yourself to follow through. And the reason you're not following through is Because you haven't learned how to shift your emotional state at will. Think about the last time you felt unstoppable. Maybe it was after a win. Maybe it was after a breakthrough moment. Maybe you just woke up and something clicked. You had energy, you had clarity, you didn't hesitate, you moved, you made decisions faster. You spoke with confidence, you executed. That wasn't magic, that wasn't luck. That was emotional leverage. And when you're in the right state, the impossible starts to look like a challenge instead of a threat. But when you're in the wrong state, tired, overwhelmed, uncertain, you'll talk yourself out of opportunities that could change your life. The question is not, how do I get more motivated? The question is, how do I generate the emotional energy required to take action, especially when I don't feel like it? You can't wait for inspiration. You can't hope that the mood strikes. You have to create your own momentum. And momentum begins the moment you shift your physiology, your focus, and your language. Because those three things control your emotional state. Change how you move, change what you focus on, change what you say, and your emotional state shifts instantly. That's the switch. That's the access point. We've all been conditioned to believe that our emotions are random, that they happen to us. But emotions are patterns, they're habits. Most people live in a narrow emotional range, frustrated, tired, distracted, bored. And when that becomes your emotional home, it becomes your reality. But emotions are not fixed, they're fluid. You can rewire yourself to live in a different state. You can train yourself to operate from a place of courage, of gratitude, of drive, not once in a while, but daily. That's the edge. That's what separates people who dabble from people who dominate. High performers don't always feel great. They're not always inspired, but they've conditioned themselves to step into a peak state whether they feel like it or not. They've learned that motion creates emotion. The fastest way to change how you feel is to move. Change your posture, change your breath. Get loud, get intense, break the pattern. Because when you change your body, you change your chemistry. And when your chemistry changes, your mind follows, you suddenly see possibilities, you remember your why, you reconnect to your mission. We don't procrastinate because we're lazy. We procrastinate because we've associated more pain with the task than with avoiding it. Emotionally, we've linked the action to discomfort, fear, or failure, and the brain is a master of avoiding pain. So it delays, it distracts, it convinces us to wait. But if you can flip the script, if you can associate massive pain with staying the same and massive pleasure with taking action, you create leverage. Now you're not forcing yourself to act. You're pulled by a vision, driven by purpose, fueled by emotion. That's why visualization works. That's why affirmations work. That's why peak athletes, top CEOs, world-class performers all prime themselves before they perform. They don't just walk into their day, they step into a state. They light themselves up emotionally because they know that how you feel determines what you do. And what you do determines your results. Emotion is the bridge between knowing and doing. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but without emotion, it just collects dust. It's emotion that makes you execute. It's emotion that turns an idea into reality. So if you want to change your life, don't just ask, what do I want? Ask, how do I want to feel every single day? Because once you decide on your emotional standard, everything else starts to align. Your thoughts shift, your actions elevate. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You become the moment. When you learn to control your state, you control your destiny. Emotion, when harnessed, becomes your superpower. The story you tell is the cage you live in, that voice in your head narrating your life, that endless loop of thoughts and beliefs you've rehearsed for years. It's not just commentary, it's construction, it's the blueprint for your behavior, your choices, your limitations, your identity. Most people think they're reacting to life, when in truth, they're reacting to the story they've told themselves about life. You're not limited by your circumstances nearly as much as you're limited by your interpretation of the world isn't holding you back. Your story is. You think you're stuck because of your past, because of your upbringing, because of your current situation, but it's not the facts that are keeping you trapped. It's the meaning you've attached to those facts. The same event that breaks one person can build another. The difference isn't in the event, it's in the narrative. Some people go through hell and decide it made them stronger. Others use it as a lifelong excuse to stay small. That decision, that story, becomes the lens through which they see everything. It becomes their cage. Your story determines how you show up in the world. If you tell yourself you're broken, you'll act broken. If you tell yourself you're not ready, you'll delay action. If you tell yourself people always leave, you'll sabotage relationships. Your story becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your destiny. You don't rise above your story. You live it out over and over again, even if it hurts. even if it limits you, because the brain craves familiarity over growth. It wants consistency over truth. If you told yourself something enough times, it becomes real, even if it's a lie. The most dangerous stories are the ones that sound reasonable. I'm just not a confident person. I wasn't raised with success habits. I've never been good at relationships. These aren't facts. They're patterns, and patterns can be broken, but only if you're willing to confront the story. As long as you defend it, you're locked in. You may not love your story, but you're comfortable in it. It's predictable. You know how it plays out. There's certainty in your suffering. And until the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change, you'll keep replaying the same script, even while telling yourself you want something different. Transformation begins the moment you question the narrative. Who told you you're not enough? Who convinced you that your past defines you? Who said you have to be perfect to be powerful? The voice in your head isn't always your own. It's your parents, your teachers, your old failures, your fears, all wrapped into a story you've confused with truth. But it's just a habit, a mental loop. And you can interrupt it. You can rewire it. You can choose a different meaning. And when you do, everything changes. People think changing their life is about changing what they do. But lasting change comes from changing who you are. And that starts with changing your story. If your story is, I always quit, then even when you start something new, you'll carry the energy of a quitter. If your story is, I don't belong, then even when you walk into the room, you'll play small, shrink back, hold your voice. The story drives the state, and the state drives the action. So if you want to change your action, start by rewriting your identity. It's not about pretending or faking confidence. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. That unfiltered, bold, authentic version of you that didn't apologize for wanting more. That version still exists. It's just buried under layers of old stories. Stories of failure, of rejection, of fear. But none of those define you. You define you. And the most powerful thing you can do is make a decision when the old story ends here. You've told yourself the same lines for so long they feel like facts. But facts don't hold you back. Beliefs do. And beliefs are nothing more than repeated thoughts with emotional reinforcement. You chose them once, you can choose again, but it starts with awareness. What story are you telling yourself about love, about success, about failure, about who you are and what you're capable of? And more importantly, who would you be without that story? Silence the script long enough and you'll start to feel the truth again. That you were never broken, that you've always had what it takes, that the cage was never locked, that the walls were made of words. Words you can rewrite and words you can reclaim. Because the pen has always been in your hand. You just forgot you were the author. You bought into someone else's narrative and made it your own. But stories can be edited. They can be rewritten. They can be burned and rewritten bold ink with a new voice, a new tone, a new standard. And that new story becomes your new state, and that new state becomes your new life. Every thought, every word, every belief you choose going forward either strengthens your cage or breaks it down. The decision is yours, and it always has been. Progress equals happiness. It's one of the most fundamental truths of human fulfillment, yet most people completely miss it. They chase things, money, titles, bodies, relationships, thinking the arrival will bring the joy. But the real juice of doesn't come from getting. It comes from growing. It's not the goal that lights you up. It's becoming the kind of person who earns the goal. It's the daily evidence that you're moving forward, stretching your limits, becoming more than who you were yesterday. That's what creates the fire. That's what gives you life. Think back to the times in your life when you felt most alive. It wasn't necessarily when you were the most successful. It was when you were making the most progress. Maybe you were building something. Maybe you were learning something new. Maybe you were coming out of a tough season and finally taking your power back. You didn't need to have it all figured out to feel fulfilled. You just needed to know you weren't standing still. That something inside of you was waking up, expanding, evolving. That's the pulse of life. Forward motion. You can be in a mess and still be happy. If you're growing, you can be in a season of rebuilding and still feel powerful if there's progress. But the moment you feel like nothing's changing, like you're just repeating the same cycles, stuck in the same job, the same emotions, the same excuses, that's when the light goes out. That's when you start to feel like something's missing. That's when anxiety, frustration, even depression creep in. Not because life is objectively bad, but because you've lost the sense that you're expanding. Humans are not meant to stay the same. We're wired for growth. Evolution isn't just a theory of biology. It's a necessity for the human spirit. And yet so many people spend their lives chasing security, chasing certainty, trying to lock in comfort and avoid change, and then they wonder when they feel stuck. Comfort zones kill fulfillment. Safety is not the same as happiness. You can have all the right things on the outside and still feel dead inside because you're not growing. You're existing instead of living. Progress doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you're winning every day. It means you're moving. It means you're reaching. It means you're failing forward, learning faster, sharpening your edge. It means you're no longer accepting the same level of excuses, the same low energy, the same patterns that kept you stuck. You're raising the bar, even if it's just by a little, because little by little becomes momentum, and momentum is magic. Once you start seeing yourself improve, even slightly, you begin to trust yourself again. You start to believe in the possibility of more. It's not about how far you have to go. It's about recognizing how far you've come. Progress ignites belief, and belief unlocks action, and action creates results, and results create emotion. That's the loop of momentum. Most people try to wait until they feel good to take action, but they've got the order backward. It's action. Any action that triggers the feeling. That's why the tiniest steps matter. That's why one push-up, one phone call, one uncomfortable conversation can be the start. Not because it solves everything, but because it disrupts the pattern of paralysis and reminds you that you're still in control. If you want to feel more alive, stop asking how to be happier. Start asking where you can grow, where you've been playing small, where you've been settling for less than your potential. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's emotional, maybe it's financial, maybe it's spiritual, but there is some area of your life where you've let your standards drop, and that's where your energy is leaking. That's where you've disconnected from your power. Reclaim that space, re-engage with it, not perfectly, just intentionally, and don't wait for motivation. Motivation is a byproduct of momentum. It shows up after you move, not before. Progress creates the pull. When you start to see the results of your effort, however small, it rewires your brain. It gives you emotional evidence that growth is real, that change is happening, that the gap between who you are and who you want to be is actually closing. And suddenly you're not chasing happiness anymore. You are happiness. Because happiness isn't an emotion, it's a consequence. It's the natural result of honoring your potential. Growth creates certainty in an uncertain world. It becomes your anchor, your power source. When you're growing, you stop obsessing over things you can't control because you're too busy becoming stronger, smarter, more capable. You stop getting stuck in fear because your identity is evolving. You don't feel the same level of doubt because you're proving to yourself day after day that you're adaptable, resourceful, resilient. That's the kind of confidence that sticks. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know that no matter what happens, you're not going backward. You don't need to have everything figured out to feel fulfilled. You don't need to be 10 steps ahead. You just need to know that today you moved, you did something uncomfortable, you disrupted the autopilot, you acted in alignment with your higher self, and that's where fulfillment lives. Not in the finish line, but in the forward motion. Because at the end of the day, progress is the evidence that you're alive, that you're still in the game, that you're not done becoming who you were born to be. Massive action is the cure. When you're stuck, overwhelmed, second-guessing, overthinking, doubting, there is only one force powerful enough to break through all that noise movement, not cautious steps, not timid planning, not waiting for the perfect time, massive, aggressive, relentless action. Because action is clarity. Action is momentum. Action is the bridge between where you are and where you want to go. Most people are sitting around hoping for a sign of feeling, a green light that says now is the moment. But waiting kills dreams. Overthink kills confidence. Only action creates transformation. You don't need to know every step of the journey to get started. You just need to move. You just need to take the first punch, make the first call, write the first word, launch the first version. Too many people are obsessed with doing it right instead of just doing it real. They're planning so long they never arrive. They spend weeks, months, even years preparing for something they could have learned by actually doing. Massive action doesn't mean reckless action. It means decisive action. It means you stop using perfection as a shield and start engaging with the process. When you're in motion, you're in control. You're not trapped in your head. You're not stuck in a loop of worry or what ifs. You're building feedback. You're learning. You're adjusting. Life rewards speed. It rewards those who move with urgency and intensity because momentum compounds. One bold move leads to another. You begin to trust yourself. You stop needing every external opinion, every bit of reassurance, because you've built your own internal certainty through movement. And with every step, you build that muscle, the belief that you can handle whatever happens. It's not that successful people have no fear. It's that they've learned to move in spite of it. They've learned that fear is not a sign to stop. It's a signal that you're on the edge of growth. Most people freeze when fear shows up, they shrink, they delay. But what if you flipped the script and made fear your compass? What if instead of avoiding the discomfort, you hunted it down? And what if you made a habit of leaning into the things you normally resist? That's what massive action trains you to do. It turns fear into fuel, and action breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. You can't think your way into belief. You act your way into belief. You show up again and again, even when it's messy, even when it's uncertain, and eventually your brain catches up. It starts to realize you're someone who follows through, someone who finishes, someone who moves. That's how you shift your identity. Not by reciting affirmations, but by stacking evidence through action. You start becoming the person who does hard things, who builds, who breaks through. Massive action creates results not because every move you make is perfect, but because you're playing at a level most people never touch. You're failing faster, you're learning quicker, you're forcing feedback from the real world instead of just running mental simulations in your head. You can fix a bad plan. You can fix no plan. You can course correct in motion. You can't steer a parked car. That's the power of getting into the game. It's messy, but it's honest. It forces growth. It forces leadership. It forces change. Most people wait until they feel ready to act. But readiness is a myth. It never comes. Action doesn't come after confidence. It comes before it. Confidence earned through execution. It's built through battle. You develop it by doing hard things before you feel like it and realizing that you didn't die. You handled it, you grew from it, you became more because of it. And the more you stack those wins, even the small ones, the more unstoppable you become. Massive action also creates clarity. Clarity doesn't come from thinking about 100 different options. It comes from taking one step and seeing what happens. Action gives you feedback. Feedback gives you insight. Insight gives you direction. That's how you find your way. Not by sitting still and hoping the answers fall from the sky, but by moving and discovering what works through experience. The more you move, the more patterns you see, the smarter your actions become. It's not just movement, it's momentum with intelligence, but it starts by moving before you feel ready, by deciding that progress matters more than perfection. You'll never escape fear. You'll never eliminate uncertainty. You'll never fully outsmart doubt. But you can out them. You can move faster than your excuses. You can make bold moves while everyone else is still debating what to do. Because in the end, the person who takes the most aligned, massive action wins. Not because they had the best plan, but because they out-executed everyone else. Because while others hesitated, they advanced. While others debated, they decided. While others feared failure, they used failure as fuel. Massive action is how you rewrite your story. It's how you collapse time. It's how you stop being a spectator and start becoming a force. If you're feeling stuck, it's not because life has singled you out. It's because you've been living inside a story, accepting a standard, operating without clarity, letting old emotions dictate your direction, and hesitating instead of taking bold, decisive action. But the truth is, you're not broken, you're conditioned. And conditioning can be changed. You can raise your standards. You can choose a new story. You can channel your emotion to move instead of freeze. You can get clear on what you want. And you can reclaim your power by taking massive, relentless action in the direction of your vision. Progress is happiness. When you grow, you feel alive. When you move, you build momentum. And momentum doesn't just change your results. It transforms your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's stuck and start knowing yourself as someone who's rising. Every small win becomes a building block in your foundation of confidence. Every bold move becomes proof that you're not here to settle. You're here to lead your life, not react to it. This is your wake-up call. No more waiting. No more stories that shrink you. No more standards that keep you safe but small. You've got everything you need right now to shift, to act, to break free. The only thing standing between where you are and where you're meant to be is the decision to move. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, but today.